Hey guys, welcome back to Dude We Can Fix It. Today we're going to start an exciting new series on the 4L60 transmission. This one's a 4L60E coming out of a 2003 Chevy Tahoe. So stay tuned. This video we're going to take it out and then we're going to have a whole series, a video for disassembling the transmission, a video for reassembling the transmission, and then another video to end the series reinstalling the transmission. So stay tuned. Alright, so the first thing you're going to want to do before you start taking stuff apart to remove your transmission is take a 5/16 wrench and disconnect your battery. We always start with the negative side. It's much safer. Alright, now that that's out of the way, we're ready to remove the starter. Alright, so the first thing that I like to do when either installing or removing a transmission is to jack the vehicle up and take the wheels off. You don't have to take the wheels off, but it helps. So now we're going to put some wheel chocks behind the back tires and jack up the frame. Now we'll check and make sure that this is secure in every direction. Alright, I am content. Now we'll pop the hubcaps off. We'll need a 22mm socket to remove the lug nuts. So, now that we have the battery disconnected, we'll go ahead and remove the starter. There are two 13mm bolts holding the starter on. Take those out first. Alright, so we'll loosen up this 10mm bolt. Just a little bit that we needed there, so take that off. Now I'll start with the small one. This is a 5/16 on the signal wire here. We'll loosen that up and take that off. Alright, take the signal wire off. So now you'll need a 13mm to take off the power wire coming to the starter. There we go. Pop this wire off and remove the starter. That is the starter and the little plate. Now we will need a 10mm socket. Alright, now we're going to remove these two 10mm bolts on this heat shield on the passenger side of the transmission. Alright, just two little bolts like that. And then take out the heat shield. Alright, so now we are going to drain the transmission fluid out of the drain pan with this 15mm socket to take out this bolt. This bolt is in there really tight.
Nothing.
Alright, now we're ready to remove the drive shaft. You'll need an 11mm wrench to loosen these four bolts. We'll take these bolts in this bracket out and also the other two, and we'll put those in a Ziploc bag, keep them together and organized. Put these in the same bag. Now we can push this forward towards the transmission. If your transmission's not in neutral, this would be a good time to go ahead and put it in neutral. Make sure that you have wheel chocks on your back wheels before you do that though. So we'll push this forward. You may need a small pry bar. There we go. Push it forward a little more. Now we'll drop this down. And then we'll just pull the entire drive shaft towards the rear of the vehicle. We'll go set this off to the side, out of the weather. I've already loosened these nuts here, but we're going to go ahead and remove this bar, this support bar on here. What you'll normally do is get your assistant or your other hand to hold a 21mm wrench on the other side of these nuts. And then you'll use a 21mm, hopefully you have an impact, and loosen it up. And then we'll do the one in the front. Pull that out. And on this side, sometimes both of the bolts will be facing the same way and you'll have to wiggle it around the exhaust. It can be difficult, and if you can't get it all the way out, just skip forward to the next section where we're unbolting the exhaust, and that'll give you a little more play. But I was able to get them both out, and whenever I reinstalled it, I went ahead and swapped one of the bolts to make it a little easier. So once you have that nut off, go ahead and disconnect this electrical connector, move it out of the way, and then take this bracket off of there, set it out of the way, and then you see that there is a backup nut on here which acts as a spacer between this bracket and this. So now we'll remove this nut, once again a 21mm. Now before we remove the last bolt on each side, make sure that you have a jack supporting the transmission. That way you're able to take the weight off of this member, pull these bolts. As you can see, I've already loosened these two, so I'll just finish taking them off. And I'll remove one bolt from each side. And now, you'll need a 15mm. Come in here and remove the one nut on the transmission mount. I've already loosened that, so I'll go ahead and take that 15mm nut off. Now we can jack up the jack a little bit and remove these last two bolts. Careful not to let the stabilizer arm fall on you. Take it down and set it off to the side. Now we're ready to disconnect all of our O2 sensors. First, we'll pull this blue clip out and then pull up on this tab, disconnect this O2 sensor, throw this wiring bracket over the frame rail and let it hang. That way it won't get hung up on anything while we're removing the exhaust. This connector here on the passenger side as well. Pull the blue clip, disconnect, toss it over the frame rail, let it hang. We have this O2 sensor, pull the clip, disconnect it, let it hang, and then there's the last O2 sensor up in here next to the transmission. Disconnect it and let it hang. Now we're ready to remove the exhaust. If you haven't already, go ahead and soak all of your exhaust bolts in some penetrating oil. Now we are ready to remove the exhaust. We'll start back here in the back. We've already loosened these bolts up, these nuts, but there's two 18mm nuts back here, like this. Now we can separate the exhaust, and then there's three 15mm nuts on this side and another three on this side. These have already been loosened up, obviously. We used a impact wrench to loosen them up. All right, wiggle a little bit towards the rear of the vehicle, and we're able to get it out, and we'll go set it out of the way. All right, so now we need to remove this connector over here. We'll squeeze in on both sides and lift up, and then we'll come over here and remove the vehicle speed sensor. Just push this tab out and pull it down. We'll take this whole wiring harness and flip it over to the other side. Alright, so now we're ready to remove our oil cooler line. You're going to want to put a pan underneath the transmission here. This little black piece you'll just grab and push off, and then I'm going to show you how to remove this clip, and once that clip is removed, you'll be able to just pull this line straight out. Here, where you can actually see what's going on, how to remove your line. So your line will be coming in here with a 90, so it'll look something like this. What you'll need to do is get your pick and find one of these ends and pull it out like that. Get your pick in there and pop this clip out. Now you might want to have your hand over this, because a lot of times when it comes out, this will spring off. And then once you pull your line out, go ahead and replace this clip. Make sure it sits fully. See how that's not sitting fully? Push it all the way in. And then this is ready to push the line back in. So when your line's ready to go back in, all you do is push it in until it clicks. Alright, so now we're going to remove the gear selector cable. This just pushes off. we go. Wiggle it out of there. And then on this side, this has 2 tabs that you have to push in with your fingers. Push in just like that. Wiggle it out. And take it out on the thin section. Alright, so now we need to disconnect the neutral safety switch. We'll use a heat gun on a low setting and heat these connectors up because they have glue in them that will keep them from coming out. Once you've got them nice and warm, you should be able to pop these tabs and pull the connectors out. Like that. Alright, so now we need to remove this vent hose. You just grab it and pull it off. Just like that. So now we are on the passenger side, underneath the engine, looking back at the transmission. We're going to go ahead and take out the 3 15mm flywheel to torque converter bolts. You can actually use a ratchet and extension here, but we're not going to, so that you can actually see what's going on. Just going to use this 15mm wrench. So we'll remove this bolt. And you can use a large flathead screwdriver to rotate the flywheel around. There's the next one. Now we'll remove this bolt, and then there is one more. So once you have all 3 bolts removed, keep those 3 bolts together in a bag labeled torque converter bolts, and we'll move on to removing the rest of the bell housing bolts. Alright, so now we're going to remove this 13mm nut that holds on this bracket, which aligns the fuel lines and the electrical harness. So we use our 13mm wobble socket on some extensions here. Then I'll get the impact on it. Now we can take that off and take that bracket off. Alright, so we're about to remove the dipstick tube. First, come in here to this bolt, this bell housing bolt. You can see that there's a 13mm nut that I've already loosened. So we'll take that off, and then I'll get my assistant to pull up on the dipstick tube. A little more. It's pretty snug. There we go. Now you want to secure that up and out of the way for the rest of the removal. You can use a zip tie or some tape or something. Just make sure that it doesn't fall down and get stuck. We got the 13mm nut off of the bolt holding the dipstick tube on. Also got the 13mm nut off of the bolt holding the fuel lines, this bracket over here. So we got both of those off. We're going to go ahead and remove the 15mm bell housing bolts. There's one over here, one top center that you can't quite see, another one over here, one over there, this one on the passenger side, and then this one on the driver's side, and the one at the bottom there. So we're going to remove the bell housing bolts with this 15mm wobble socket, and then we have a 3/8 by 10 inch wobble extension, a 3/8 to 1/2 inch adapter, a couple of 1/2 inch extensions, and impact. So when we're taking them out, it'll look something like this. So now we just have 2 bolts left, one on each side, and Joe's going to go ahead and take this bolt out. There we go. Now we're going to take our last bolt out from the other side. Alright, this is our last bolt. There we have it. Now I'm going to get on the back side of the transmission and hold some support. We're going to jack it up a little bit more, and usually you'll have to use a pry bar to separate the bell housing from the engine, but ours appears to be coming off pretty easily. Now all that's left to do is to remove the transmission from underneath the vehicle. Alright guys, so that's how you take the transmission out of your GM truck. That encompasses removing the 4L60 and the 4L60E transmission from any GM truck or SUV. Please stay tuned for videos on disassembling the transmission, rebuilding the transmission, and then reinstalling it in the vehicle. We have a great series that we're starting with this video. So if you enjoyed this content, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and stay tuned. So here we have the tools that we're going to need for this section. We may not need the channel locks, but they do come in handy. You will need at least